afternoon, everybody. Apologies for the slight technical hitches we've had there, but hopefully you're now able to join the session, and we can start the process. So what's going to happen today is that I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction, just to set a little bit of the scene, and then I'm going to hand over to my colleagues at SecurityHQ, Ferris and Islam, and you can see their pictures on the screen there, and you'll also be able to see them in the video in the background in front of the London SOC. What we're going to do, hopefully, is take you through, rapid incident response, why this is important, why it actually matters to you, and then run down some other aspects of incident response and the need for speed in reality when it comes to doing these things. So I'm going to set the scene a little bit before I ask my colleagues to come and tell you something about this. So first, let me ask you a slightly different question. So how much is your company worth? Well, this is an interesting question. It actually depends on who you ask. But to somebody like an initial access broker, this could be valued between about £1,000 and £100,000, depending on who you are. This means that in reality, you're always a target, because if you're talking about £1,000 worth of cost to gain entry to you as a company, actually the barriers of entry are so low, almost anybody can have a go at you. It's then important to understand things like the types of adversary that you're up against. Right? It's been stated that the modern ransomware gangs now have the same or better capabilities than some nation states. Let's consider REvil for a moment and the Kaseya hack. The gang used a level of planning and sophistication closer to high-level government-backed hackers rather than mere criminal operation. This included the use of a zero-day exploit, using a supply chain hack that compromised at least 1,500 organizations, and probably a lot more, as actually Kaseya can't state how many companies were actually affected in this way. This allowed the attackers to compromise one piece of software and actually get thousands of targets. This was not the same as the same style of attack we saw in SolarWinds, which was linked to Russian-backed and state-sponsored attacks. In that case, the penetration that they used was to get into high-profile software companies for espionage, and other companies ended up really as collateral damage, and they weren't the actual targets. Secondly, it's kind of important to understand how modern breaches happen and what it means to you. Right? The first things to consider is the entry point. The entry point normally for most modern attacks is phishing, PNG with payload or weaponized Office document, a drive-by download, leading to a browser extension. And as all of you are probably aware, you don't actually need to be an admin on the box to install a browser extension, right? Remote access, VDI or VPN, insider action, whether it be deliberate or accidental, or third-party software you use. And we've seen this more and more recently with SolarWinds, Acelion, Mimecast, Kaseya, and the list goes on. Once the attacker, though, has got an initial foothold, there are different speeds that they move at. The initial vector can be there for some time while it's being sold to a more motivated attacker. And this goes back to my initial question about initial access brokers. This is then where escalation comes in, and the techniques that attackers use mean that they can hide in plain sight, but usually using techniques that are really hard to discover for most companies. This includes memory resident processes that are difficult to find as nothing's written to the file system. So standard AV actually only checks on a file write. And once a foothold's established, they then use techniques that include known pipes and SMB, usually from hosts that you would naturally expect to perform these functions, like file servers. These things are not logged by Windows and are therefore not picked up in standard log review or by standard SIEM processes, which means you miss them. The time that they spend in your system depends on the attack that they're perpetrating. For things like business email compromise, this could be as low as 15 minutes from initial entry to the outblast of email, or as much as a couple of days for things like payment diversions. For ransomware, though, the entry point may have been there for weeks or months, and then you usually get reconned for a couple of days, data exfilled, and then encryption in a matter of hours. Nation states, on the other hand, can be in networks for months or even years before they actually get discovered. So depending on the compromise, depends on how long you've got. And this could be as low as 15 minutes to make a decision about what you do. But that's even before the fact. You've got to discover it. You've got to understand what it is. You've then got to make decisions. And in 15 minutes, it could all be over. There's generally a bit of emotional response to this as well. And I'm going to cover this very, very quickly before I hand over to my colleagues. Emotional response differs, and it's different from management and IT. The emotional response from management generally is denial. Well, it can't happen to us. You got to be wrong. Anger directed towards the IT person. This is your fault. Why did you let it happen? Bargaining. Don't they know what we do? This is unfair. What if we were to pay? What if they didn't steal any data? What if it isn't as bad as we think it is? Then depression. I might get fired, especially if you're a crisis-induced sacrificial officer like me, or CISO as we're better known. Or there goes my bonus that my significant other has already spent. And finally, into acceptance. We've got no choice. The team will have to deal with it. The emotional response, though, from IT is very, very different. The first part is denial. What do you mean your laptop doesn't work? Must be user error. Oh, no, actually, it's on the servers as well. Right? Which one of you is the joker? Then into anger towards management. Generally, I told you that if you spent more money and gave me my budget that I asked for, this wouldn't have happened. Then into bargaining. Overtime, please, boss, seeing as I'm going to be working a lot over the weekend. Into depression. I've so much work in front of me. How do I explain that I've got to work late or over the weekend again to my husband, wife, significant other, cat, dog, goldfish, etc.? And finally, into acceptance. Here we go again. So what do we do about this? Well, actually, it's very lucky for all of you that I have two great guests for me today in Ferris and Islam, and they're going to now take over from me and actually tell you what you can do about this. And then hopefully what's going to happen is that we're going to come back together at the end. You're going to provide me with some ammunition and some really nasty, horrible questions to ask the pair of them. Otherwise, I'll make some up for you. But please use the chat function. Send me your questions, and then at the end of the explanation, I'll come back and I'll ask the questions for you. Ferris, Islam, over to you.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you for painting a truly depressing world that we live in. It is a serious question, though. I mean, I appreciate it. So let me run through the quick agenda of what we're going to achieve quickly over this presentation. It's a real pleasure to be here. I hope everybody can start to see my screen. Let me just, okay, so we're going to run through quickly about us. What does a CISO need? That's a topic that I'm going to cover. Then the common SOC response challenges, building a next generation SOC, rapid incident requirements, proactive security, basically what to do to get onto the front foot, the threat intelligence benefits of an IR team, the incident detection and response, the MDR service, and the reporting and security posture. Now, if you're looking at this agenda and you're going, what? Don't worry, it's all going to come clear, okay? So quickly about us, and this is not a rah-rah about it. As you can see from where I'm sitting here at the moment, I'm in what's called a SOC, which is a Security Operations Center, okay? So quickly about SecurityHQ, and it's important you understand that because you can understand where we're coming from, all right? We are not a technology reseller. We don't actually sell tech. We sell very much a service-based sort of thing. And we are a significant cybersecurity, very much on the front line. We have over 260 security trained individuals scattered across the world. We generate over 80 billion logs a day, and that number is pretty soft because it's a lot more than that. And we own and operate over 6 security operations centers around the world and multiple different continents. I'm calling today, as you can see, from the London SOC, which is a significant security operations center based within a tier 3 data center. And it comes with all the security, all the caveats about it, all right? I established the company back in 2003 with my partner, Christine, and we're still very much a bootstrapped company that those started off as a couple of engineers. We're now 260 plus people. We don't have any private equity. We are not funded or one of these startups. We've been doing this a long time. We've been doing this for over 15 years, and that makes us a veteran within the business. So what you're seeing behind me here is all the logs being monitored by multiple different security professionals. And it even correlates to the different SOCs across the world. And they are made up not just of SOC analysts, which is an L1, L2, L3, and L1 being a basic person, but they're backed up by a significant infrastructure team, content management teams, incident response team, specialists within the technologies that we're utilizing. And of course, it comes with all the automation that's required, the experience playbooks, everything that's required, and how we actually deliver it to the end customer. All right. So far, I haven't mentioned a single vendor. There is a couple of logos there. People want to see how we do it with what stack we use, and that changes all the time. I'm certainly not here to push any single vendor going around. Our clients use us to deliver a service for them. But let's get into that a little bit. Okay, so I don't want to, in this presentation, talk about this specific function that can change your life, because I don't actually believe in such things. I'm always going back to, what does a CISO need? And this is a slide I developed that some of you, if you've ever heard me speak at one of these things, I always do, because I still use this every single day. Every decision we at SecurityHQ, when we make our own security sort of decisions, comes back to this web, is what I call it, of what we're trying to achieve, okay? So first of all, obviously, if you have a perpetrator, you're looking for a speed of detection. You cannot have it done in days, weeks, or months, okay? So you've invested in your tools. All of you at some point, whether it is the basic antivirus, firewalls, but a lot of you have got way more complex systems that you've spent money on and you want to utilize those, right? You can't just throw them in the bin. You're saying, okay, I've got my firewalls, my IPSs, my IDSs, I spent money, that didn't work for me. Is it correlated? All our clients have the same questions with respect to that. But ultimately, they bought these tools for speed of detection. And they don't want to do it in days or weeks, right? They're looking to do it in seconds and minutes. Now, if you're going to detect, you've got to have the capability to respond. And that's exactly the same sort of scenario. You've got to use the same criteria. Your response cannot be days, weeks, or months. You cannot wait for Steve to come back from his weekend or his fishing trip or something like that, Google, and see what it says about this. You can't do that, because the risks are so enormous that you've got to have the speed of response has got to be in seconds or minutes. Now, our networks are 24/7. Everybody works 24/7, truly. And the internet works 24/7. Guess what? This doesn't, it's no different to a burglar. He doesn't generally burgle your house while you're having supper with the family. He does it, he or she, I suppose to be fair, does it in the middle of the night or in the middle of the day when you're at the office. They rarely do it on weekends, or they do it late at night. It's the same when a perpetrator knows that. He knows your network when you're there, when you're not there. So if I was going to attack somebody, I certainly wouldn't do it during working hours. Why would I do that? Why would I give anybody? Surprise is the best form of attack. So you need to have not only the capability for speed of detection and response, but you've got to have the capability to do it 24/7. 24/7, and I'm going to say this more than once, so I apologize to everybody, because unfortunately some of my competitors, what they define 24/7 is automated. All right, I'm talking about resource, humans on the glass every single day of the year, no exceptions. That's true 24/7. Then that resource that I allude to, we're way beyond, in this world of where we live on, of somebody who has some knowledge. You really must have the capability of somebody to have the capability to detect and react and respond to complex threats. Steve alluded it before, right? The cyber criminals are so well funded. Why? Because the old adage, crime doesn't pay. I can 100% categorically assure you that cybercrime does pay. It pays extraordinarily well, because the risks of getting caught are so minimal at it that you just have to get lucky a couple of times and you are rolling in it. You really would. So it does pay. But the more complex you can make your attacks the harder it is for the people to defend against it. The harder, it's just a matter of time then before you manage to push them up. So that has an issue on our clients, that they have to have that capability of complex threats, the capability to react to such things. I know we all know the challenges when it comes down to skills and expertise. It is a real problem for everybody around there, including ourselves. We're fortunate as a company because we can recruit from all over the world because of our global presence. That does help. But for our clients out there, they will tell you that finding skilled at the right cost, if you have the budget, and retaining them is a massive challenge to get those skills, in-house and that capability. Never mind doing 24/7. To run a global security operations center, it takes minimum 12 people because you have to run 4 shifts. Okay, we run a 4-shift. We actually name them Oscar, Delta, Yankee, and Zulu. And those are the different shifts that run around. So it is a significant investment. So when you're looking at it, to have a security team, like partially what you're seeing behind me here, you're spending millions of pounds before you've even spent any more tech on it. So the skills and expertise, and they need to be certified. Then you get into the risk visualization. That's really important. What I mean by that, majority of our clients have zero visibility, because when you visualize risk, you have to visualize it in the context of, well, this looks unusual activity. What's happening? What databases are they attacking? I'm giving you obviously an example. Well, what is the knock-on effect to that? How can it affect my business? So you're going through the what if scenarios all the time. You need to have a team that can visualize that very quickly, because again, I'm going to refer to back what Steve is happening, like what I call the stages of grief, what he was going through. But what Steve didn't mention is that these things are rapidly happening. They're happening within 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes. And Steve and I have done many calls where we've seen that denial from a customer, and half an hour later, he's close to tears. And then 2 hours later, he's broken. He's actually broken because he's realized what the impact is. And he will perceive that the impact, he or she will perceive the impact is catastrophic to their business. So that you need that risk visualization, because we all need to sell it sometimes to the upper management so they can listen and understand. And then we come down to corporate governance. As an organization, everybody should have some form of standard, okay? Some are mandated standards. If you're coming from the financial or medical practices, maybe you have HIPAA standards and multiple standards that you are legally obliged to actually follow. But you shouldn't run away from standards. When you're going for any security journey that you're going through, you should also think about, well, how does that affect my standards that we have? Whether we're using something like a MITRE ATT&CK framework, for instance. If that is a standard we're trying to benchmark ourselves on our security posture, there should be a standard. Now, most of our clients don't have them. Okay, when they start, they don't have a local standard. They've got no SLAs, no ALIs, so no OLAs, no SLAs, no KPIs, no metrics they're enforcing. They're not seeing that visibility. And last but not least, you need cost certainty. Yeah. We all have CFOs. We all have budgets. Nobody has an open checkbook. I wish they did. I wish all my clients did, but they don't. The reality is they've got so much cost. And when they make an expenditure, they need to make sure it stays fixed, as long as you don't change your network dramatically, obviously. But you need that cost certainty. So if you're wondering what I'm talking about at this stage, right? This is what I call the wheel. Even within our company, and we're always making investments in our own security. As you can imagine, we have a significant network. I always ask myself, will it improve speed of detection? Does this enhance my response? The 24/7 we have, but am I adding the training, for instance, the capability of skills to handle the complex risk? What are the true risks that I'm seeing, and how we have the capability to understand those risks? We work towards a MITRE ATT&CK framework within our company, and whatever standard our clients were. And I obviously, as a CEO, need cost certainty. So I know that my own team, when we're doing our own security, they're sticking to a budget. They have to stick to the budget because there's no other extra money for it, basically. Why I always do this slide, because this is the outcomes, what we're trying to perceive. Too many times, vendors talk about a new flashy feature that's quite cool sometimes, And yeah, it could really help your life. But actually, let's go back to basics and understand what we're trying to achieve. Okay. Now, as I say, we're not going to talk about technology. I'm going to talk to you about a SIM. Okay. So the SIM, a SIM tool is a piece of software. It is a piece of technology. It is something that I've been in the SIM space, I suppose, for since the beginning 15 years ago. But a SIM is not a SOC. And what I mean by that, so for you, for the people out there who don't know what a SIM is a piece of software, right, that looks for unusual incidences. It's actually, but it has the incredible capability of gathering all your logs from all your applications, physical, virtual, cloud, and your applications and your firewalls, servers, whatever. It centralizes everything, and it's monitoring that for unusual behavior. When it detects unusual behavior, it correlates it against a set of alarms. More than that, it has the overlay for you to create rules and use cases above it. So it means you get the capability of seeing the full visualization of your network. And as I said, not just physical, the applications as well, but also have a reporting capability, incident, and then customize your security controls to what your business needs. Now, there's no other tool out there that can do that. So what I mean by that, if I'm a bank, for instance, and I have a lot of SWIFT payments or whatever that really high risk application, once I understood my assets, I can create use cases against that, okay? That's just a piece of software. But the problem is with a SIM piece of software, and as I said, we've been in the business a long time, and what you're seeing behind you is the heart of a SIM in many ways. It's not a SOC because you need many other features. They are highly complicated tools, okay? They need to be managed 24/7. They need to have the content built, and it's like having a Formula One car, right? We all know fantastic Formula One drivers. If you follow the F1 circuit, I know Steve does, but the team behind it is more impressive than the drivers in many ways. The guys who work in the factories, the guys who maintain, operate, and then obviously race day, you have a whole different pit crew that really has to be humming constantly. All right. Again, technology will not resolve those outcomes that I spoke to. There'll be one piece of it. So the SOC that we're seeing, and I said to you behind is we use QRadar from IBM. If you're interested, there's multiple other tools out there as well. So that is the next generation heart we built. On top of that, we have multiple different layers. But let me talk to you about the most important layer to build a fourth generation SOC. First of all, it is the people. Now, you're never going to get around this. You can never, ever, and I have seen some vendors try to hint that one day we won't need these people. Good luck with that, because we're hiring them all the time. So we need SOC engineers. So 24/7, as I mentioned, takes a minimum 12 people if you had one SOC. At SecurityHQ, we have 6 SOCs, and we're opening another one by the end of the year. And that's why we have 260 individuals. But they're not all SOCers, because a lot of them are what we call content management. Those are the individuals, a highly skilled team that develops all the use cases, like the examples I gave you about, let's say, a SWIFT transfer or whatever the use case against your business. We have people who build those use cases customized to our clients' needs. The SOC levels go from what's called a SOC, an L1, an L2, and L3, L3 being the most experienced. So in L1, basically what they do is that we get a deluge of alarms that comes, that basically come in. Hundreds of thousands of alarms a day come in. Our L1s clean them up. That's how they start. They're generally about 2 years out of university, and that's how they start their cybersecurity journey. Then they go up to an investigator, then to a responder when they're an L3. We have an L4. An L4 is off the scale capability individual. Even with our company, I'd like to say we have 6 L4s. We don't. We have 1. We have 1, because that's how hard it is to become an L4. Then on top of that, those people that, our skilled team need what's called a cyber range, full training, all that capability. That is the people portion of building a next generation SOC. Then you need the processes, the log management, the incident response playbooks. How do you react on that? And my colleague is going to talk about that in a second. The infrastructure playbooks, how to handle false positives, the offense handling, the intelligence handling. These playbooks and these processes we've developed are years were built 10 years ago and have been modified 100 times and are constantly being modified. It's not something you can download. We are constantly tweaking the process to get the maximum response for our clients and to increase our capability on handling those complex threats. It's a huge part of it. And only then do we get into the technology piece that I alluded to. Okay, whether you buy what SIM you use, the UBA, the network analysis, the EDR, the MDR, it just goes on and on, all the technology. The technology changes all the time. That's fine. But ultimately, SecurityHQ is built on these layers. And I always put the people number one, then the processes, then only the technology at the back end. Because the technology problem is something you just throw money at. The other ones, you can't rush it. And going back to that wheel I said to you before the beginning of the presentation. But why do we do it? Because we want rapid detection, rapid response, the capability for complex threat detection, the user risk definition, and the risk visualization. Apologies, for some reason I'm struggling to talk today. Okay, that's how we do it. All right, but that gives us significant capability when we talk about rapid instant response requirements and how we do it. I'm going to hand over now to my colleague, but just before I do that, I want to say thank you very much for your time today. But what you're seeing here at our London SOC is like the accident and emergency ward, right? And you're going to see a bit more of a deep dive. Now I'm going to physically move, so please excuse me, but I'm still sitting here.
Thank you very much.
Survey going on. So please take a note of the poll session, please, guys, and please.
Okay, so while the team get themselves ready, here's the poll session that's just come up. So hopefully you'll be able to see the results now. And over to Islam to carry on with the presentation.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Steve and Firas. So I'll be walking you through the rapid IR requirements, what we need to establish first before having the IR requirements, or what would lead us to have the rapid IR requirements to make sure that we are controlling the level of digital risk and threats. So first of all, I will go and talk about the concept of the managed extended detection and response, probably one of the most common buzzwords that I hear nowadays in the market and across the industry, which is more of a new kind of vision, really, or a kind of a concept to satisfy the modern cybersecurity requirements by how we can augment the level of visibility that we can have throughout different security analytic tools, like the SIM and UEBA, which is the user behavioral analytics and machine learning, and then how we can complement the level of visibility and threat detection that we can get from such core SOC tool, actually, by having the endpoint detection and response, the EDR, which is to augment the capabilities of the regular antivirus and malware-based detection, and then adding the third pillar, which is the network detection and response, by expanding the level of visibility, not just relying on the log analytics through the SIM or the endpoint telemetry, but expanding the level of visibility and going into the network payloads and packets and lateral movements and network flow and all of that sort of stuff. The idea really here is, now when we look into the type of threats that we are facing at the moment, it's not just we are trying to chase known IOCs or indicators of compromise or malware or kind of commonly known viruses or trojans. It's now a game of chasing signatureless type of attacks, living off the land type of attacks, mimicking a user profile or something like that in order to gain a foothold and keep spreading across the environment and inflicting harm on your organization. So we need to be able to be much more smarter really in how we can detect malicious behavior, how we can detect tactics and techniques and procedures, rather than just tracing known IPs or hashes or specific host names or CITO domains. So the idea really here is that obviously having all those three pillars of modern cybersecurity requirements from a visibility detection, you need to have at the heart of all of this a properly skilled pool of security analysts, which we offer from SecurityHQ as part of Bytes, in order to be able to manage that kind of expanded level of visibility across your environment, the 360 degrees visibility across your environment, from which, based on that level of visibility, we can detect various types of threats, whether known ones or unknown ones, perform threat hunting exercise and drills in order to detect early signs of malicious activities. And from there, we would be able to establish a rapid IR strategy and SOPs and playbooks in place as well. So moving forward into how we would establish the required level of visibility across any environment. First of all, we follow the industry best practice and how we do this. So we follow the NCSC guidance called the SOC feeds, which was released a couple of years ago. So a wonderful, actually, and a piece of reference that we use internally within our SOC. And since we started to employ it, we have seen a great success in terms of how we can be very well organized and structured in establishing a layered approach of visibility across different environments. And from there, we can obviously develop the required IR response strategies. So first of all, we look into break it down into different pillars. First, we look into the traffic crossing the boundary. We're looking for the traffic traversing through the trust to untrust, crossing your perimeter, going into your cloud resources, crossing through your firewalls, your email gateways, any type of traffic that goes out of your environment, all the outbound, north, south type of traffic, DNS and IAS applications, DMZ and MCAS. And then based on obviously the type of assets that you will have in your environment, that will map against that visibility pillar. And then we move into a second visibility pillar in which we establish as part of our MDR service or SOC service, which is the activity and the boundary. Now we need to look more closer into the perimeter, the edge itself, in terms of any kind of signature-based type of matching or the IP or detection, like an IPS and IDS, the WAF and CASB and SASE, as well firewall policies, the cloud native firewalls like Azure Firewall or the WAF web application based firewalls. And then we move into what's beyond the perimeter or the internal type of resources and assets, and establishing this internal level of visibility by looking at your internal workstation, servers and devices in terms of your file integrity management, your device configuration, your database transactions that's happening, how your the Active Directory authentication logs and domain controllers and all of that sort of stuff. And then we kind of focus more into the insider type of threats and the level of visibility that we need to establish by looking at your host-to-host communication, your lateral movements, how your users are interacting with your internal resources by looking into your Active Directory authentication logs, the Windows security events, which gives us a great deal of visibility on different type of common behaviors that can actually help us in detecting and spotting a specific anomaly or a specific irregularity that can lead into detecting a wide scale of a penetration or a specific multi-stage attack within your environment. And then we move forward into the network connections by trying to pick the irregular type of connections that we would be able to spot. And we would look actually and focus on the transient type of connections like the VPN. And this is a great actually level of visibility that we need to establish, and extremely important. I cannot emphasize the fact and how important it is. Reason being, since the start of the pandemic, many of us, actually most of the workforce, they have been working from public networks like our home network or public network, whatever, that offers little to no security. And the chances of getting compromised are extremely high, really, while using our corporate laptops for doing some shopping or anything like that. And from there, our identities would be stolen or compromised, or we don't even have any kind of awareness on this. And then the attacker will stay under the radar to not be detected. Once we establish a legit connection or a VPN connection to access our corporate resources, they will actually leverage the same type of legit connection in order to gain unauthorized access into our corporate resources. So it's extremely important to focus the level of visibility, not just across your internal network and systems and lateral communication, but also getting more closer into your user activities, the user perimeter, into the identity, MFA, and the endpoint transactions as well, and the VPN connections that's being established and the amount of traffic that's being sent across such VPN connections, and what happens after the authorization phase and after getting the access into the legit access into the environment, and what happens next, and how we can look into different type of anomalies for that type of transient connections. And for that, obviously, we would try to integrate and get the best level of visibility out of your SDN and WAN, your VPN access into the IIS and PaaS, the shadow IT, I would say, like accessing into the direct access into the SaaS resources or Dropbox or whatever, any kind of like file sharing websites that you won't really regularly monitor, and you no really VPN connection needed to monitor them, or corporate connection or anything like that. We'll try to get a good level of visibility into them, your Microsoft Intune, multi-factor authentication logging as well. And then the last pillar of visibility that we focus on as we are keep on integrating with your environment and building the required SOC and IR capabilities on top is looking for the session activities generated by the users of workstations, looking for the malware and non-malware type of threats, leveraging obviously the AD, again, authentication logs and Windows security events, Azure AD and audit logs as well, the Microsoft 365 stack as well, in terms of all of the logging that we can get from the from your cloud and Azure Active Directory, service accounts and interactive logins, and your Windows share, how they are being leveraged as well for any potential lateral movements, and your privilege accounts, how they are being leveraged as well, and Office 365 payment, etc. Moving forward in terms of, okay, so now we have done this required type of integrations, or to establish the required visibility across your environment, but is that sufficient, or is that enough, or we need to be much more smarter, or more to preempt the attacks that would happen? So first of all, while we actually perform the high-level asset profiling, understanding your environment and the assets that we need to integrate against the NCSC guidance and SOC feeds, we would actually look into your assets and threat landscape as well, and try to understand your battlefield. Whenever any kind of an attack would happen, actually, we need to better understand your threat landscape, your vulnerable areas, any kind of leaked information, compromised credentials, weak SSL certificates being used on any of your publicly exposed web servers or applications, and so on, and how we can monitor your specific corporate assets and brand related assets, and try to monitor and look how if there is any kind of leakage on the open or deep or dark web, and for that we can leverage actually a wide range of assets to perform that level of monitoring, so that we can be much more proactive really in establishing and laying out the required security defense and use cases that eventually obviously will help us from an incident response perspective. So once we perform a digital footprinting and understanding your threat landscape and the risks lurking outside and the hostilities on the internet, people trying to break in or leverage any of your confidential information, we would take that type of information, process it through our dedicated threat advisory team to see if it makes any sense or possess any degree of risk on your environment. And from there, obviously, we'll be able to map the relevant threat detection use cases based on the level of intelligence that we managed to get from your own dedicated scanning for your own assets. The second point of being more smarter from our SOC operations and understanding the threat landscape and the proactive security defense that will eventually help from an IR perspective to limit down the dwell time of any attacker and our response time, and expedite the time to close security incident and minimizing the digital risk along the way, is obviously being able to perform a regular managed vulnerability scanning by looking at any vulnerabilities across your environment, especially after the super patch Tuesday, and by looking into the delta or residual type of vulnerabilities, or the remaining vulnerabilities within your environment, and the residual risk that still exists within your environment, and based on obviously the assets and assets criticality will be able to guide you on how fast you need to patch the vulnerable systems, and obviously develop use cases around the vulnerabilities that we discovered, so that we ensure that none of your vulnerable or any of your systems that have any kind of vulnerability will be compromised or is being actually compromised by any type of attack or reconnaissance or anything like that. So moving forward, after establishing this level of proactive security intelligence in place, and scanning and understanding your threat landscape, and being able to establish a threat-informed defense in order to expedite the time to respond and detect and respond eventually, we move into the incident response phase, how we do it from a SOC perspective, from a SecurityHQ perspective. When we look into the model of the managed detection and response, some of the players on the market, they would just focus on the detection bit, or just looking for the generated alerts, without actually giving you a proper context around the alerts, or even capabilities on how we can move forward after detecting that specific alert, how we can have a proper recommendation and actionable insights, and how we can move forward to mitigate the spotted threat within your environment. So from our side, we actually follow obviously the NIST incident management standard, and we look into, first of all, when we establish and allocate the threat detection use cases, we look into them that they must be relevant to your own assets, to the vulnerabilities that we managed to find within your environment, and relevant obviously to the threats that we found over the open and deep and dark web as well, that would be relevant to your environment. So it's all about laying out the foundation of a threat-informed defense, so that we can always be proactive rather than being reactive, really, each and every time responding to a specific threat within your environment, and constantly being able to reduce the attack surface for your own organization. And then obviously based on this, that will lead into having high fidelity alerts that will help us in expediting the investigation needed into them, rather than just being overwhelmed with false positives or fake alerts that they don't really possess any kind of risk for your environment, or even they have no relevance to your environment. And then our SOC team will pick those high fidelity alerts, perform a very thorough analysis into them, extracting all of the incident artifacts in terms of IP and non-IP information, perform the required threat enrichment on them as well. And then based on this, they will raise a qualified incident to you with the proper analysis that we have done into the incident, and the next actions and recommendations on how we can mitigate the spotted threat, whether it's a pre-exploit or post-exploit. And for that stage, we do have a number of ways actually of how we can present you with this information, and constant update to your security posture as well in a visual manner through our SecurityHQ incident management platform, and SecurityHQ Response mobile app as well, which is extremely handy, especially when bad things happen at awkward times, out of business hours, or during the weekend when you try to go to bed and sleep at night. Obviously comes very handy. I call it the SOC in your pocket, really, the mobile app, where you can get to engage with the security team and monitor and track how we are handling your security incident, and invoking the required playbooks to mitigate the spotted threats. And this is the stage where actually we move into the instant contamination from our side, where following the L1 and L2 SOC analyst work stream, our L3 and L4 analysts will be engaged based on the severity of the incident, obviously, especially if it's a post-exploit, meaning that it's a successful breach that we managed to spot within your environment. So obviously we will be invoking the required playbooks and automated contamination actions and remediation, and the endpoint and active security controls to mitigate it as fast as possible and try to stop the compromise at the source, rather than waiting for it to keep spreading like wildfire across your environment. And then obviously we move into incident management and remediation support, where the collaboration will always stay in place, will be available through the mobile app, through the incident management platform, where you can always collaborate through the bridges that we can establish as well, where you can always collaborate together on how we can take the spotted incident and threat, mitigate it, eradicate it, and recover you from that situation, and close the incident successfully within the agreed timelines, and governed obviously by the SLAs for the different incident severities. So as you can see, it's a very comprehensive incident response methodology that we apply as SecurityHQ, working with Bytes, obviously for the Bytes customers, in order to ensure that we're not just opening your eyes into like different type of threats within your environment and putting the problem on the table and walking away from it. But actually, we put ourselves in your own shoes, actually, on how we can move forward together in resolving you from the discovered threat and making sure that along the way we keep improving the deploy detection mechanisms and threat detection use cases and improving your security posture accordingly. As I explained before, obviously we use all the time the industry best practice while we are establishing the required level of visibility across your environment, how we can expand on the detection mechanisms, and obviously from an incident response, following the NEST framework from a preparation perspective of identifying your high business impact assets and critical applications and crown jewels that we need to protect and throughout different detection mechanisms and the use cases, SOPs as well, that will govern how we will respond to a specific threat or incident based on the attributed assets. And there can be an critical object to your organization or a certain C-level role within your organization and so on. And then obviously the detection and analysis based on the streamline or the framework that I just explained, and then moving into the containment and eradication and recovery, and obviously the lessons learned and documentation of how we manage to detect a specific threat, investigate it, qualify it, and take the proper remediation actions. And obviously all of this will be automatically documented for you on the SecurityHQ incident management platform, so you don't really need to bother that much about how we can get all of the bits and pieces all stitched together. So that will automatically be done for you as part of our SOC service. In this slide, this is a bit of more of a deep dive into the framework of how we deliver the managed detection and response, or the managed extended detection response, which is, again, as I explained before, establishing a good understanding of your environment, understanding the battlefield, again, because when something happens, it will happen within your own environment, so you own the battlefield. So that's always an advantage that we need to maintain by constantly understanding your business characteristics, your assets criticality, and obviously using the threat intelligence in place in order to be able to understand, like digital shadows that we use within our SOC, to understand any potential compromised information that could be later on used or leveraged in a phishing attack, like C-level identities or impersonated or fake domains or websites or social profiles, or credentials that can be used later on in a multi-stage attack against your own organization or your own suppliers or your third party or your own customers and so on. And obviously establish the required level of data collection across your cloud and on-prem resources, and then getting to process this information and apply the required context around them from both a business perspective by on an endpoint, and that endpoint will be your domain controller. At the same time, we detect it on a print server. Obviously, we need to be able to distinguish which incident we need to respond to it first. So again, it all leads to a more rapid incident response capabilities, right? And enhancement to the incident response. So the more context we manage to establish and gather around your own assets, the faster we'll be able to respond to the raised or spotted threats and incidents within your environment. And obviously the commercial intelligence that not just relying on open source intelligence, because anyone can contribute into it, can produce junk, so we lose the whole point of having confidence when we respond or we investigate a specific threat that we detect within your environment. So we rely on our own commercial grade intelligence that we spend loads of money on it over the years, like IBM X-Force and digital shadows, in which we use them as a stock feed in order to constantly be able to validate the instant artifacts and alert artifacts that you manage to spot from your environment. And then we move into leveraging the power of machine learning and user behavior analytics to automatically rank your users based on their anomalies and looking into the highly scripted and highly automated type of attacks. So rather than just relying on correlation rules and role-based detection or IOC known or a type of detection, we need to expand this detection capability. And now move into detection capability beyond the human scale, highly scripted, highly automated. We're talking about leveraging your own identity without your awareness in a truly harmful way against your environment, or using the Microsoft legit and trusted business applications as well, and using them in a truly abusive manner against your environment. And then we move into the analysis and detection response, where our skill pool of security analysts will pick all the generated alerts from the correlation detection, from the user behavior analytics and machine learning, the threat hunting drills as well that we will always do as part of the eyes on the glass, looking for early signs of malicious activities. They will aggregate all of those alerts, qualify them, eliminate any false positives, apply the required investigation and next actions, and how we can move forward into mitigating the spotted threats within your environment. And then moving forward on how we can present you with this information in a structured manner and easy to comprehend as well through our reporting. So while most of the SIEM technologies like IBM Curator or Aegis Sentinel, whatever, or Splunk or whatever out there in the market, they do a great job actually from a threat detection perspective, but still on the flip side of things, from reporting and having the visual awareness of what's happening within my environment, still very poor. You don't get much context. So we do have a dedicated reporting team that will focus on releasing weekly report for you, very comprehensive, gives you a good understanding of the level of digital risk within your environment from a risk assessment, quantitative versus qualitative, the misconfigurations that often can be leveraged against your environment, and presented to you over a weekly SOC meeting through a dedicated service delivery manager and L3 analyst who will be assigned to your own environment, taking care of your own security challenges and issues. And obviously the SecurityHQ incident management platform, where you can access 24/7 in order to see your security posture and top trending events and incidents, and how the SOC team is handling your own security incidents and alerts. And then the threat containment, which I explained before, which is, again, we do it as part of our SOC service, which is how we can respond fast to the detected threat using the power of the SOAR playbooks, in which we can respond to repetitive type of attacks, like distributed denial of service or targeted attacks, like a phishing, specific spear phishing campaign or anything like that, where we can save the time of analysts and leverage the power of the automation to respond to those type of attacks, and get our analysts to keep them focused on what really matters, and responding to highly sophisticated type of attacks and threats. And then the last stage, which is still essential, basic requirement of having a SIEM and an MDR service, which is compliance. So we'll give you a 1 year of free data retention here in London in our data center, tier 3 certified and physically secured data center, where we can host your data for 1 year for the sake of compliance and digital forensics and reporting as well, that will always be needed as part of the service delivery. And that's the whole comprehensive framework of how we deliver our SOC service, our MDR service. That obviously, at the heart of it is ensuring that we're always delivering a rapid instant response capability, obviously in coordination with Steve's team at Bytes as well. And then moving forward into how we can show you the output of our service, the fine-grained information of all of the hard work that we do for you 24/7 is through the mobile app, SOC in your pocket, the web portal, where you can easily get a visual understanding of your security posture, the top trending events, and broken down by the different threat vectors that we manage to detect, fully aligned against the Cyber Chain and MITRE ATT&CK framework. Here, obviously, at this slide, this is more of the consolidation point. Again, one of the great values that you get of having a SOC partner and an MDR provider is the ability to consolidate all of such type of information and alerting into a single pot, which is the incident management portal, the mobile app, having a RESTful interface that can help you to, in which we can integrate and extend the capabilities and level of interoperability with other third-party ITSM tools like ServiceNow, Remedy, and so on. So it's all about the consolidation, and obviously augmented with the human element, which is the service delivery management team, will always help you in facilitating your requirements and being your own SPOC and single point of contact as well, facilitating the service delivery throughout the whole service lifecycle. And then we'll move into how you can keep track of your security posture and the different issues that we will be able to spot on a weekly basis for you. which is the weekly SOC reporting, which we produce based on the constant querying for your own data against a specific type of information that we will agree on. And obviously we can customize it based on your own requirements as well. So we can be very bespoke on how we can deliver the reporting that will meet your own requirements from a technical perspective and a business perspective as well, from an executive summary or a QBR kind of summary as well, as and when needed. And moving into the last bit, obviously I'm wrapping up here with my presentation, is most importantly, we're talking about a service. So we need to ensure that it's being delivered with quality and obviously meeting the agreed timelines. So we do have obviously an SLAs in place that will govern the service delivery based on the severity of the incident that we allocate. Incident severity is derived from the asset criticality attributed to that specific incident, the magnitude or the blast radius of that incident in terms of how many assets, how many endpoints or users are being part of that specific incident, and last but not least, which is the compromise of your CIA triad. That incident is compromising how much of your confidentiality of your information, or integrity of your systems, or the availability of your applications and systems, and so on, from business continuity and operations perspective, which obviously we need to ensure that your business is up and running most of the time, and having security as an enabler to do so rather than being a disruptor for your business continuity. And with that note, I finish my presentation. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you, Islam, and also Ferris at the start there. We're going to wrap up very shortly. I'm going to ask one question of the team, because I know Ferris always likes these questions. He likes to answer these things for me. I'm going to ask for a very brief answer because we've got to wrap up because the next session will come along shortly. So we've talked a lot about the MDR. We've talked a lot about XDR. We've talked a lot about the operations within the SOC. But talk to me briefly about the role of the SOC in a breach, and why it's really important as a source of truth and coordination of effort to streamline processes when it really counts.
I mean, first of all, the key word is capability and knowledge, right? So the capability of the SOC team, because it's a significant team, spans everything from experts in firewalls, IDSs, IPSs, the experience they bring. But when there's a specific breach, they're the ones who hold the data. They're the ones who've alerted it. They're the ones who possibly started the first basic triage steps. But they also have all the historical logs. They have access to all the network. They have access to all the applications. So when we're scanning and we're looking for things, we're looking for the telltale signs, we're starting to rule out that stuff. That's where the SOC really comes into its own. Yes, they're very defensive. They spend most of their day batting things away, closing things, alerting things, improving posture. But when it does go down, they're the ones who had all that historical information. They also act as an incredible coordination. And Steve, you know that, where independent incident responders, as themselves as professionals, will turn to the SOC, go get me that. I need that. I need that. Because time is of the essence. I always use the analogy about like an accident and emergency room, because it can be like that. It's about getting the body temperature down, identifying, ruling things out as much as ruling things in, so you can start quickly funneling down to what it is, triaging, containing. And then once you've contained it, then that's a different sort of operation. SOC can get back to the day job, because believe it or not, while you're dealing with an incident, you still have to keep monitoring that client. And on the contrary, you never know whether the attack is historical, in progress, or about to be deployed. And you never really know the answer to this. And Steve, you are an expert in this. You know what I'm talking about. You never get like a final answer. You know what I mean? It's a never-ending story.
It always is, and interestingly enough, as Ferris alludes to there, actually, funnily enough, working with the team and doing some of the digital forensics in customer cases, you know, working with the SecurityHQ team, it's the only time I've actually heard, you know, my head of digital forensics and incident management who's got 35 years experience in the industry, you know, actually moan that he's had too much data to look at, you know, and I kind of had to remind him how churlish it was of him, you know, because every other case he always moans, we haven't got enough data, we can't see this, we haven't got that. And I said, come on, think about it. It's the first time, you know, in 20 odd years that I've been working with him that he's actually moaned he's had too much data to look at, you know, so that's really, really important. We're right on the end, unfortunately. You know, please don't forget to fill in your feedback forms, as this helps us run these sessions and so you get what you want out of them. The marketing team of Bytes will send out a link to the webinar recording as well, because we've recorded this. And also, you know, if you prefer to submit any questions, you can go to Bytes of SecurityHQ or tell me more at bytes.co.uk in order to, you know, ask us any further questions, or please talk to your account managers to follow up. Also, you know, SecurityHQ have a great service and they offer a free 30-day managed detection and response trial. You know, please answer the question. Let us know if you'd like to participate in that. It's a really good trial. It gives you a really good demonstration of capability and some of the things that have been talked about today. You know, visibility, speed, and information, as well as the context, but more importantly, the people that sit behind that, are really the key thing. When, you know, when it hits the fan, you want to be able to pick up the phone, talk to skilled and experienced people, and you won't find probably any more, you know, skilled or experienced people than you've got at SecurityHQ anywhere else in the industry. So hopefully you've enjoyed today. Hopefully you've learned a few things in terms of, you know, what great looks like, and also, you know, the capabilities that are there and available to you. Again, please fill in the feedback. Please do give us any questions if you've got them. And thanks very much for listening. Thank you to both my guests, Islam and Faras as well.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve.
Thank you, everybody else.
Thank you for your time.